Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of To The Point podcast. We are here on the final day of August 2021. Can't believe it. Summer is winding down, but today we get a 27-degree Tuesday in late August. I can't really complain about that. And Tuesday, we are going to be talking about the season 3 finale of Breaking Bad today. But like we mentioned last week, Shamus and I are going to be doing something a little different. We'll talk about the episode. Then we're going to jump into the Pacific Division offseason in the NHL. We'll talk about the Canadian teams in the division and Arizona, and then we'll pivot to Cali and Seattle next week while discussing season 4, episode 1 of Breaking Bad. So we're going to do we're jumping in 2 different pools here, so to speak, but it should be a lot of fun. We'll tackle both things today. But Shay, you were talking last week about how JoJo Mason was coming down from the ONT. How did that go this weekend?
Good. Sloppy Joe made her down. No, it was good to see him. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, and it was nice to reminisce about the good old university days. But more importantly, just catching up. Kind of like you, he's trying to get into sports, and you're in the media side. He's in the management side. So that's kind of the venue he's going for. But no, it was good. Good to see him and his girlfriend Amanda. Nice to catch up, and overall just kind of a quiet weekend, which I think was needed. My liver was kind of hurting after a pretty rough August, so it was nice to take it easy for once.
Yeah, ditto. It was good to DD for some people.
You were off the booze too, eh? You were
yeah,
off the
I've
booze.
been off for like 3 weeks, and to be honest, I feel fantastic. I don't really want to go back on her. I don't think I'm going to this weekend, but I'm sure I'll see you this weekend, but maybe in a sober instance. But yeah, catch any sports this weekend? Watch anything in particular on your quiet weekend?
No, not anything. I try to catch a little baseball here and there. I wasn't, I saw a couple NFL preseason games, and I thought of you. I was like, geez, I really should turn one of those on. But, no Baker, no Jarvis Landry, no Myles Garrett. It's just not for me. I don't think I'm going to tune in.
Yeah, fair enough. Baker actually did play Sunday night.
Oh, well.
So he did play. He did play.
Did he play well?
Not bad, actually. Yeah, I actually had a pretty good start. It was against Atlanta, so grain of salt there.
Yeah.
But I did pull off some more degenerate moves watching a lot of preseason NFL and then Nebraska, Illinois in college football. That I watched almost all of that game, which I'm not entirely proud of, but I did watch. It starts Thursday, Ohio State, Minnesota. I'm excited for that, to get college football officially starting, and then the NFL the following week. So it's going to be fun couple weeks for yours truly. But Breaking Bad, the season 3 finale, we've been talking about all the different interactions. We had the episode like Fly, where we see Jesse and Walter interacting. It's a great season. I think you could argue it's the best season of the entire series. But we finished last week talking about Walter killing the 2 employees of Gustavo, running them over with his car and then shooting one, execution style right in the head. And we kind of head into this finale not knowing where we stand, just with Walter telling Jesse, run.
Yeah, exactly. If you can remember, they had that big sit down at the end of the last episode named Half Measure. And it was kind of there's nothing going to come of this. This is it. This is the end of this, this dispute between Jesse and these 2 drug dealers. And sure enough, what happens? They end up killing them. And you just think, oh God, what's going to blow over? He was mad enough at the fact that he was going to try and kill them. Now that they are dead, you're just thinking what kind of repercussions are going to come from Gustavo Fringe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think the finale and this episode is so interesting and so much happens. It starts very, very weird. And I want to get your take on it, but it's a flashback to a young Walt and a pregnant but younger Skylar buying their home. Clearly Walt is still working at Gray Matter. He thinks, I'm going to be making lots of money. This is kind of this is a starter home. Like, we're going to have 3 to 4 kids. And why do you think they decided to go with this as the intro to this season 3 finale?
I just think because and kind of tying it together, but you're right, he's just really ambitious, and I think, you know, you can see that ambition is still in him, just unfortunately kind of directed at a different kind of motive, where he's now selling drugs instead of probably doing good for the world like he was doing at Gray Matter. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure why they threw this in here. It was, it's interesting to see. Obviously, Walter still has hair, he's long hair. Like you said, he's kind of brash. He's like, oh, we can get a much better house. Like, let's just expand the budget. So I'm not 100% sure why they throw this in there. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, he's wearing a biker jacket, which really cracked me up. I found that kind of interesting. Yeah, he's got his same demeanor. I agree. I would say that they did this because it's Walt kind of showing that he once was a successful person, and he was in a position of power, so to speak, and he clearly dominated the family when it came to decision making, even though it's a partnership when you get married. But I just think it was to show Walt, him being ambitious, him not being afraid to take risks, but also life has its turns, as my grandfather once said a few times to me. And they talk about having 3 kids, and this would be their home for a couple of years. It's almost 20 years later. Junior's 16, I believe, and they're still there. So it just shows you how life can throw you some curveballs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From being kind of cut out from Gray Matter to becoming a school teacher to everything else, and kind of having to downsize. Looking back at it, you could say that was the perfect house for them, because it was probably affordable, where if they would have bought this big old mansion that he envisioned, then they would have just been doomed, and would have had to sell that.
Yeah, it could have been a bankruptcy or possibly worse. So who knows how that would have went. So we go from this scene to, we just see Walt parked out in kind of the middle of a field. You see some cactuses. It's not completely the desert, but it's very secluded. It's very barren. And he's sitting there waiting. And then we see the Yukon or Escalade, the black Escalade that Gus always rides around in. And we just see headlights. And Walter gets a call from Mike.
Yeah, so Mike calls him and says, basically said, well, start walking towards the car. This is definitely a safety measure for, Gus and them, to make sure that Walter's not going to pull anything crazy, like run them over, or, maybe walk out with a gun of some sorts. And, it's this funny scene where Walter goes, I need some kind of assurance, that I'm going to be okay. And Mike goes, Walter, I could kill you from over here. Don't worry about it. Just get your ass over here. So yeah, he kind of just strots along, and Mike meets him halfway and kind of starts just nagging him. Like, and he goes, I've been up for 3 days, basically cleaning up your mess that you and Pinkman have made. And, I'm not happy about it. I like my sleep. And, Walter's just like, doesn't know what to say. I think he's more nervous of anything of the reaction that Gus is going to give him. But it's just a funny little reaction that him and Mike have together, because they don't get along. Obviously, we've seen that in the past. Because Mike's the right-hand man, and I guess Walter kind of thinks he overpowers him in a sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think, they clearly don't get along whatsoever. I think Mike is very careful. He's very similar to Gus in that he does his business very efficiently. He does it quietly, and he likes to get the job done. Then he can take a break. Walter is very reckless. Walter will take risks. He will, just kill people out of the blue, and then Mike has to come cover it up. And like he said, and he even said, like, Walter, you didn't get your car fixed. Like, you idiot, you're going to want to get your car fixed. Like, get your taillight fixed. And Mike's he's fed up. Like, he's like, okay, like, I've already done all this work, and then I still have to tell you to do this one simple task, at the same time knowing, Gus is probably going to chew Walter out here in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So sure enough, he gets to the car, Gus gets out, And he says, how's your health? Like, are you okay? And Walter goes, yeah, no, I'm good. He's like, oh, your condition hasn't worsened. Because he's basically saying, what in your right mind would make you do something like this? And, he's upset, and he has every right to be, because, they basically dealt with the piece. And, now comes, the punishment. And Walter says, like, I have two options. And option A, you kill me here and now, no one's going to see it, which is a risky thing to say, because maybe that wasn't even in his mind in the first place. And option B is, we kind of put this behind us and you just let me cook.
Yeah. And Gus just kind of looks at him with this death stare. Like, I don't even know what to do right now. And he said, but he's still not kind of over the initial. He says, why would you intervene for a junkie? Like, this guy's only caused you problems. Why do you keep helping him? And he said, well, you told him he'd stop using children. And he was upset that the kid ended up dead. And I'm kind of thinking maybe you ordered the hit, which just sets Gus off.
Yeah, he's outraged. He says, you really think that I would do something? And even though Walter says, like, no, I never would even ask you that, Gus is still pissed. He's like, what am I even supposed to do now? Like, I can't trust you whatsoever. And you're right. He just got this look of disgust and displease on his face. The actor does it really, really well, actually. Yeah. So they kind of like, you just notice it. Like, it doesn't take very long, and you're like, okay, this guy's fed up. And he basically says, well, he's like, okay, like, you can keep cooking. And then Walter says, I'll need a new assistant. And Gus says, no, I'm picking the assistant this time.
Yeah. And, Walt's like, okay, I'll start looking. No. I picked the assistant. So we then pivot to the next day. Walter is coming to the lab. He walks in, and the other right-hand man of Gus, Victor, is right at the door. So he's got security. Now he can't move without having Gus really have eyes on him, so to speak, because it's one of his internal people. And he walks down the stairs, and who's there to greet him but his old assistant, Gail.
Yeah, Gail gives him a not so warm welcome, because if you can remember last time, Gail was the one who basically put this lab together for Walter, was Walter's old assistant, and basically got the hit with the door when Jesse walks in. And Jesse's in there cursing, swearing, oh, this shit is so cool, and well, Gail just can't comprehend why Walter would want to replace him with some loser, we could say Jesse is, in a sense. And Walter just he just shrugs. He's like, you know what, this isn't the replacement. This is what we're gonna do. Let's just cook and get this done with. But Gail is a little timid, I think you can see.
Yeah, he's clearly uncomfortable because he was replaced by somebody, and he doesn't know why he's back either. He has no idea why he's really back. He just sees that Jesse's not there, and Walter kind of says, yeah, it just didn't really work out. And he goes, okay, let's cook. We then go to, we've seen some scenes of Mike. In the last episode, we learned that he was a former police officer. We know he has a granddaughter, and we do see in this scene, his granddaughter, who refers to him as Pop Pop. He drops her off at home, gives her some balloons, but he's got a car full of balloons, which is really odd. And after he drops her off to her mother, he takes the balloons to go on a job.
Yeah, so he kind of arrives to this, we'll say, warehouse at night, and first thing he does, he gets out of the car, he grabs balloons. And I remember the first time watching this, I'm thinking, what the hell? Like, where is he going? Who's he greeting? But sure enough, this tactic, and I don't even know if this works. I don't know anything about this, but he lets the balloons go right at one of these power lines, and sure enough, it takes the power out to this warehouse.
Yeah, I looked it up. I just Googled, and apparently it has a chance of working. Like the way they both work with the helium and the power can have an effect.
Oh wow!
So interesting that they chose to do this, but we see the warehouse and there's no power. So these two guys come out the door. Mike is behind a wall and he's got a silencer gun. These two are kind of like, ooh, look who's here. Mike comes around the corner, you could see he's a stud. One bullet goes through the both of them through the window of the door, and he just, he makes his way into the warehouse.
Yeah, he makes his way in, and first thing he sees, he gets into this office, and there's this Asian lady, and she's obviously panicked, like these guys with guns. He's just walking in willy nilly, and this is this odd scene where he goes and he sits next to her, and he starts taking off her shoe, and you're thinking, what the hell is he doing? And you see all these things though, like back with the balloons, like he's an experienced guy. He's clearly done this longer than we know.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in a sense kind of a hitman slash in man, in the sense that he's kind of got all these different tools that he can use. So he gets this woman's shoe and basically throws it down this hallway, and one, we'll say ding dong, starts running through the hallway, and Mike just kind of hits him on the way out with a couple barrels.
Yeah, I kind of thought maybe the idiot thought it was like a bomb or something, because or gas or something. But yeah, he just charges. He just starts shooting, like screaming like Scarface style. But Mike gets him, so he continues to walk, and we see this older Asian man at a desk, kind of, he's clearly there not under his own will, and Mike's standing at the wall, and there's this other guy on the other side, and he's looking at the Asian guy saying like up or down. He's got his gun, and the Asian guy kind of helps him, and he shoots him through the wall right in the head, and the guy drops.
So he goes, and at first I'm just like, okay, maybe he's off an assignment, maybe he's here to kill this guy or help these people. But no, he knows this. He knows this Asian businessman is sitting at the desk, and he goes, Chow, why aren't you answering our calls? He goes, I was here against my will. I had to do business with them. I'm a businessman. And, clearly this is someone, it looks like there were chemicals, right? So I'm sure there was some kind of shortage in chemicals going to the lab. And obviously that's going to delay the process of making the meth. So this is just something I guess Mike was looking into. And sure enough, he goes, does the lady outside drive? The lady referring to the girl in the office. And he goes, yeah, I guess she can drive. And then Mike shoots this guy in the hand and says, don't ever miss one of our calls ever again.
Yeah, clearly sending a message. And he also picks up on the fact, because he goes to see Gus, that it was the cartel that was in town. So if you remember, Mike had, one of the key members of the cartel killed. He took, because they were trying to intrude on his turf. And so Gus, clearly they're trying to get some retribution, but Mike says, yeah, the cartel didn't send basically their A guys. I took them out pretty easily, but they're here, which is a concern, which will be, brought to light more in season 4. But also he says, I have no lead on Jesse yet, but I am tracking him at the moment.
Yeah. Don't you think this is a great, scene to show like the lengths I think that, Mike goes to. He goes from being a grandfather in one scene to another scene being kind of this, I would say that, like you said earlier, he's the man. Like he's just walking through guys, like no big deal. Clearly has a ton of experience in whatever he does. So he really is this kind of middleman for Gustavo, and clearly he's got a background with violence, or a history of violence, if you want to call it.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's got the sensitive side of being a really good grandfather, and we learn more about this. But his ambition is, he does this so he can give the money to his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter. That's who he cares about in life. But he clearly was a police officer, but he broke bad, no pun intended. And now he's kind of working for the enemy, but he's doing good work at the same time. So Mike's such a compelling character. We only get to know him more as the show goes on. And yeah, he's just fantastic. I love every scene with Jonathan Banks. I think he's so good in how little he says, but when he does talk, it's very profound, and you learn a lot. So then we go to this montage of Gale. He's in his apartment. He's got a lot of different plants. He's watering them. He's listening to some I don't know what kind of music that.
It's like
Yeah,
old French music,
yeah,
eh?
old
Or I
French.
don't know what
Yeah,
kind.
I even think it might have been some Spanish in there. Like it's different
Maybe.
anyway. He's a very smart guy. He's got a lot of old textbooks in his apartment. It's very hippie-esque, I would say, Shay, his apartment. You know, he's making tea. He's got some different things, but kind of a
He's a
nerdish
different dude.
hippie.
You kind of learn that he is a very different guy. You know, he's watering his plants where, you know, you usually just use a glass of water. He's watering his plants with a teacup. He's just very different. You could tell the style of music he listens to. He's got a telescope in his room. You know, you can just get the vibe that he's a different guy than most people. Clearly very smart, but just off the wall, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a little socially awkward, but very intelligent. So while he's listening to this music, watering his plants, he gets a knock on the door, and it's Gus, which he's clearly like, I don't even think he knew, like, Gus knew where he lived because he was clearly startled. He goes, "Oh, Mr. Fring, like, come in, trying to clean up, get a spot for him." And Gus basically says, no, I don't know if Walter told you this, Gail, but he's sick. You know, he's got cancer, and who knows how long he's going to, he's in this business to provide for his family. And we don't know how much longer he's going to be able to cook. So how many more cooks with Walter before you feel comfortable running the lab yourself?
Yeah. And, Gail says, a few more cooks and I'd be fine. And we go back to this look that Gus gives, and it's not a look of anger, but it's a look of blankness, like a disapproval, we'll say. And he goes, "Oh, maybe a couple more cooks," and then still has the same look. And then finally, Gail goes, "Oh, one cook, and I should have it down." And then Gus is like, "Oh, I believe in you. You're this. You can do this, Gail."
Yeah, and he gives him that reassurance, but yeah, Gail's kind of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here.
Yeah, but it's funny that Gus he's not telling the whole side of what's going on. He's sheltering Gail in the sense that he's lying to him about his dispute with Walter, and the fact that he just wants Walter out of there. Walter is perfectly healthy, as we know, and even if he may die much later, but he's, as of right now, he's kind of in remission, and his cancer is not a problem. So it's clearly just a matter of Gus kind of trying to push out Walter, but at the same time get his techniques and his cooking skills down so that he doesn't lose all the concepts that Walter has.
Right. He mentions to Gail that he can't even shut down for a week. Like, it's that much. He's making that much money, and the losses would just overflow on him. So we pivot to Victor's hanging over Walt while he's cooking, and we see Gail just ask a few questions like, when should when should we get rid of this, and when do we turn that on? And Walt's a smart guy, and he sees that things are changing, and after these few questions, he is clued in. Okay, I'm expendable to Gus. He's trying to replace me, and I very well maybe have a couple more days left to live here.
Yeah, and it wasn't really evident until he goes and meets Jesse. I guess before this, Saul's kind of laying in his office. He says he's in a conference. Mike walks in, basically threatens him. He's Saul's client, but at the same sense, he works for Gus, who is we'll say his real boss. And Saul pretty willingly, let's say, gives up Jesse and his location, but it's a fake location. Right. So it kind of just buys them more time to kind of flee. At this point, we think Jesse is, gone. Like, Walter said he's a few counties away, maybe even a few states away, and kind of just scattered all over the place.
Right. So yeah, we have really no clue where he is. As far as we know, he's out of town, but we see Saul and Walter get into Saul's car, and they start driving to, oddly enough, the laser tag location, and they are being tailed by Victor, but none the wiser. They go there to look at the spot. I'm sure, Gus is thinking this is where he's going to launder his money. This is not a real big threat. So they go in there, and Saul kind of goes off about, my PI is threatening to break my legs. Like, life sucks. Like, and all we're doing it because we're trying to protect this little shit. And out comes from around the door is Jesse. He's living in the laser tag shop.
Yeah, basically just a hideout for him to, to stay until he can get away or things blow over, because right now they have no real plan. Saul goes, okay, I'll go find Tetris or something and I'll just get out of your hair. And, we see a pretty serious conversation between the two. And this is kind of where Walter reveals, like, he knows that his days are numbered on Earth, basically, because Gale is watching every move. He's trying to be vague as possible to Gale's questions so that he can basically push it off until he doesn't until as long as he's needed, obviously. And he brings it up. He says, at the end of the day, the only thing keeping me alive is Gus needing a cook, and if there's no other cook, then I'll be able to stay alive, basically implying that Gale has to go.
Right. And Jesse's like, no, Mr. White, like, we can't. No, I can't do it. Like, I'm sorry, but I can't kill somebody. Like, it's just not me. And Walt quickly, it's okay, I'll do it. And we've seen him kill many people. He's fine with this. He goes, I'll pick me and you before Gale any day of the week. I'm sure he's a great guy, but Bob's your uncle. I don't care. Like, let's get rid of this guy. And he says, but I do need your help. He goes, I'm being tailed 24/7. I can't, get out of Victor. Victor's always on my ass. So I need you to go out there, find Gale, and give me an address. Tonight, I'll shake Victor. I'll go there and I'll kill Gale.
Yeah, and Jesse's still hesitant. He's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know about this. And, right away, Walter brings this up. And I'm sure this is what me and you were thinking. He goes, Jesse, I killed for you. Are you going to be able to do the same for me so I can live?
Yeah, basically save my life.
Yeah, basically, like, are you going to be able to save my life because I saved yours? And Jesse kind of agrees, basically. He knows he's part of the killing, but if he's not pulling the trigger, then he probably makes him feel a little less guilty.
Right. So we see later that night, Walt's holding Holly. He gets a call from Jesse, goes to the bathroom, and Jesse says, I got it. It's 6353, apartment 6, and he's home. And Walt says, good, thank you, Jesse. And before Jesse starts saying, Mr. White, there has to be another option. But before he can hear him even, say anything more, he hangs up the phone and he's preparing to go kill Gale.
Yeah, he gets his, he kind of gets his jacket on and he's, right to his car. And who pulls up at Victor in his red car and basically says, hop in. There's a leak at the lab. We have to go. And Walter says, oh, I'll follow you there. He's like, no, my job's to pick you up. I'm going to pick you up. So let's go. And you get the sense that it's going to get pretty hostile.
Yeah. The second you hear, you can't take your own car and you're in this type of business, it's over. You basically would have to kill Victor there, or you're walking into a suicide. Basically, you're walking into a bomb because you have nothing. So they get there. It's very, Victor's like, oh, after you, and he lets them in. And who's in there but Mike? And he goes, Walter, there's a leak down there. Something stinks. I need you to go fix it. And he goes, please, Mike, don't do it. Please, Mike. And he goes, Walter, the sooner you realize what the situation is, the easier it's going to be for all of us. Basically meaning, get the hell down there so I can kill you.
Yeah, and Walter pleads with him. He says, please, like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. Like, let me talk to Gus. To Gus. And finally, he uses a card. He says, I'll give you Pinkman. Like, I know where Jesse is. He hasn't left the city, and I can give you him in a heartbeat. And this gets Mike intrigued.
Yeah, clearly, if you can get both guys at once, that's the perfect scenario. You kill both loose ends and you move forward with Gale. But Walter gets on the phone and he does call Jesse, which was a risk, because what if he gets him on the phone, they track it, and then Jesse's dead in 10 minutes, either way. But he calls him and he says, I can't do it now. It has to be you. Do it now, Jesse. They got me. Go, go, go. You got a 20-minute lead. You can beat them to it. And Mike just kind of grabs the phone and says, what the hell was that? And Walter, just kind of cocky because he has some leverage back, says, oh, 6353, apartment 6. And Mike's face just goes to complete, terror, basically. And Victor runs out of the lab and starts heading to Gail's apartment.
Yeah, one thing we should mention too, before Jesse takes his call, he's lighting up. He's got his meth bowl and he's going to take a hit, but right before he does, obviously he gets this call. So you can kind of see that the path that Jesse's down. If you remember from the last episode too, he took a bump before he went to go try and kill these two guys, the two mobsters. So yeah, it's not looking good for Jesse. It doesn't look good for being sober, but Jesse goes and he gets, sure enough, he gets there and, Gail, his phone's ringing, but he's got his Spanish music blaring.
Yeah.
He's not hearing it. And he opens the door and there's Jesse, and Jesse's basically in tears.
Yeah, this is a fantastic acting performance from Aaron Paul. He sells it so well that he's crying profusely, and Gail is just like, I got money, I'll give you whatever you want. But Jesse's he's got the gun to his head and he's just profusely crying, and in just such poetic form, and how they do this on this show. The screen turns to black, but then we hear the gunshot. So, you can infer that Jesse shot Gail, but you don't necessarily know 100%. I mean, you can think that, but it ends on a cliffhanger-esque, but it does make you believe that Jesse killed his first person, so to speak. Walter's been the killer of the group, but now Jesse has, joined the ranks, so to speak.
Yeah, he took one for Walter in a sense, because, like you said, Walter, he was done. If he was not for this, he would have been done. Love the way that this season ends. If you were someone watching it, following it on AMC, week by week, I'm sure this would just be like, oh, like that's like that's just like, I want to watch season 4 just right away.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're lucky enough, we can watch on Netflix anytime. But no, it's a fantastic way to end a great season. Like you said, it could be the best out of the 5 seasons. And you're right, Jesse's got his first kill, and he was, first of all, he was on the verge of going back to drugs. Now he just got his first notch in the belt, we'll say.
Yeah,
not looking good for him, setting up for a pretty heartbroken season 4, we'll say.
Yeah, season 4 is interesting because I think Jesse changes the most in that season. Just the way he goes through things, kind of a new friendship he makes with Mike, oddly enough. But yeah, it leaves some questions because clearly Walter knew that Gus was going to kill him, but Gail being dead, it does leave open it makes us believe that Gus doesn't have a plan B as of yet, and he might have to stick with Walter, might have to stick with Jesse, but we don't know that for sure. All we know is that Gus is going to be very pissed off that this happened.
You can just imagine how bad the relationship was before they killed Gail. Can you imagine their only cook and their only guy knowledgeable to do what Walter does is now gone? I mean, he's just going to be a tornado tearing through, and a lot of stuff coming through. Like you said, Cartel kind of starts to get back in the mix with season 4, which I think is really interesting. A little pushback from them. A lot going on with Hank too. Hank and Marie really take a backseat to the last 2 episodes. I think they're not the main focus of what's going on, but they certainly re-enter the atmosphere in the beginning of season 4, I think.
Absolutely. Hank obviously is still in recovery, but he's still got his brain. His body isn't at 100%, but we clearly see, I think we really see how smart Hank really is in the next season. And it comes full circle throughout the series. But yeah, we'll talk about season 4, episode 1 next week. It's entitled Box Cutter. And yeah, that very literally, we will see a box cutter in that episode. But great start to the season. I haven't rewatched it in a while. I haven't watched it yet, but it's a good one. It's a good start to the season. It sets a tone, and season 4 is a very, I think, fast-paced season. You mentioned the cartel, and it starts off that way, and it kind of sets the tone and the tenor for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I even thought this episode, Full Measure, was pretty quick, because when it finished, because I haven't watched it since high school, I really thought there was more to the episode. I wasn't really following along with how far we got, but it just goes by so quickly, I find. And I think that just makes that's just side for good TV. If you're just sitting there like, oh really, like it's already done, I feel like I've only watched 20 minutes.
Yeah, I remember I think the same way, because I'd use the bathroom and I paused it with like 9 minutes left, and I was like, holy crap, I was only 9 minutes left. And yeah, this episode just flew by. But that wraps up season 3. Great season. We'll start season 4, episode 1 next week. But the second half of the podcast today, fast paced, and the Pacific Division in this offseason, Shay, in NHL has been just as quick, because we've seen a lot of movement. We're going to talk about the Canadian teams today in Arizona, just because they are intertwined. But of these 4 teams, which move did you like the most from either Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, or unlikely with the Arizona Coyotes?
Oh, I just love that Arizona got Andrew Ladd and all those crappy contracts. Just outrageous moves.
Goss is fair.
Yeah, Goss is fair. They got a real team down there in the desert. No, I think for me, and I might get some backlash from you, but I do think the OEL and Connor Garland move was obviously the biggest splash out of the 4. To me, it's really Jim Benning and Travis Green last Hail Mary. And it's okay, we got to do something here. You might disagree on the Travis Green one, because he's only been there 4 years. And, I think he has had some success. But for the most part, it's been out of the playoffs, a tank season. So right now, I think that for me, that's the biggest move. Obviously, I even think that, Arizona retaining some salary, I was like, oh, that's a little impressive, because it allows them to sign maybe a 4th liner they wouldn't have got otherwise. And we'll get into that contract, I think, even in depth a little bit later on. But yeah, what about you? What was your favorite move coming out of this 14 bubble?
Yeah, it's tough, because I hate a lot of them. Oddly enough, yeah, I would have to go with that as well. Ekman-Larsson makes a lot of money. I don't think he's a number 1 defenseman. I maybe he can turn it around in Vancouver, but again, it's tough because you're playing in Arizona. The past couple of years, he really hasn't been a number 1 in Arizona, and he gets paid like one. But to be fair, a lot of defensemen do. But I do like the Garland. I like that Garland was added in the deal for what they gave up virtually nothing. A lot of really bad contracts that they want, the Jim Benning signed to get 2 roster players that will help you right away. And with Ekman-Larsson, and then you get Hughes on the back end. So this does alleviate some of the pressure off Quinn. So I do like that move, but the only worry I have is they're in cap trouble. Then they get 2 players with pretty big contracts. So they really haven't alleviated any of their cap trouble, theoretically, because they're basically in the same position as they were before trading Jay Beagle, Erickson, and Antoine Roussel.
Yeah, I guess the only way you can look at it is they're better now on paper than they were back then. I think they have 10, and then with Ferland's contract on the LTIR, they have 3.5. So you really have to question. I have written down here, signing PD and Q. What are you going to do? Like, you can't sign these guys to long-term deals right away, because you're not going to be able to. One's got to be a bridge, or they both have to be a bridge, essentially. If you're Jim Benning, how do you go about this?
Yeah, Elias Pettersson's tough, because the way he's been speaking this offseason, he kind of reminds me of Patrick Laine, where he's got a lot of brashness. He's clearly a cocky guy, which isn't a bad thing. You want to be confident, but he's done nothing in the league. On paper, the guy's done nothing to really deserve a really long-term contract. There's no way I'm giving him a 7-8 year deal. And that might be a really bad decision in the long run because he could play next year, have 90 to 100 points, and then I look like Boo Boo the Fool. But I need to see production. And, you do want to pay players for what they're going to do and not what they did before. We see teams get in trouble with that. I think Chicago is a big example of, teams that did that. But, Pettersson's in, you're young now. When you're 21, 22, that's your prime. 22 to 27 is really the prime of your career. And I look at him and say, I haven't seen much from him because he's been injured, because he's been inconsistent. And, he hasn't, shown the ability to be an Austin Matthews to bring it home for you, or even a Mitch Marner, where on their entry level, you could say they got overpaid, but at least they produced when they were on those entry level contracts.
Yeah, hurt him a lot last year by being hurt for more than half the season. For me, I think PD caps out as a great two-way forward where probably he's a point per game. I don't think he'll ever be 100-point guy like you mentioned, but that's still a number one center. That's a Patrice Bergeron centerman, right, where you just great on both ends. But you're right, with the rumblings this year, he goes, I don't want to be on this team if it's a losing atmosphere. Well, you have to, I think we mentioned this on the roundtable as well, but you have to make it a winning atmosphere. You can't just be a complainer and a downer. And I thought Jim Benning did his part. He got two quality players for you to play with, one being Swedish. So,
right.
I mean,
good point.
Yeah, you really do you do take that into factor when, signing this guy. I see, if I'm Jim Benning, I'm thinking, okay, I can probably get PD to go for 7 for 3, kind of the Matt Barzal contract. He's maybe not a Matt Barzal player, but if he'll sign for that, I'd be happy with that. And then somehow you got to get Q to either bridge for, 5 or 6 million for a few years as well before you alleviate some of the other contracts you have going on.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Yeah, if you get even like 6 and 4.5 would be ideal. I doubt you can do that. Maybe I think Hughes, you have a better chance of getting him, say, at 4.5, because we see these younger D get a bridge and then get a big payday. Seth Jones, Werenski, Dougie Hamilton, they'll get it if you play well.
And it's easy. I think it's also easy to sit Quinn Hughes down and be like, okay, you might have the offensive numbers, but you have not done it defensively for us. So what when do you turn that around, and then you can get your payday? In a sense, so you got to be responsible on your own end.
And I think Quinn's he's a smart hockey person. He comes from a hockey family. He's got 3 brothers drafted in the first round, but his parents know what they're doing. I don't think he's a person that will take that as a huge slight. I think he knows last year he didn't play that great. He said that after the year. He said, I wasn't that good this year, and I was a big part of why we weren't that good as a team. So if he has that already in his mind, he's going to want to come out and play even better next year. Be rookie Quinn, maybe better than that. But one thing I can say about Vancouver, I remember talking to Casey early in the year because Casey was all about Vancouver. And I told him they don't have a chance in hell of making the playoffs. And I should have bet him the $100 that I was going to tell him to do it because I knew this team was going to stink. But I like you, I give them credit for doing something, because if they just had a normal offseason where they keep Roussel or sign another version of him and it's just another player that's just there, they are in the same mess that they've always been in. And Jim Benning will be fired because he probably should already be fired. Let's be honest. I think I can look at 2 general managers, which we'll touch on another team that I don't know how the guy's still employed. But Benning, for what Benning's drafted, for some of the trades and just some of the idiotic signings, he's lucky he's getting another kick at the can here.
Yeah. And like I said, this is just a Hail Mary. If it works, well, he's going to look like a genius. And if it doesn't, then his ass probably will get canned during this year or at the end of the year, I guess. Right.
So, yeah, Beagle, Roussel gone. Another Jim Benning, Braden Holtby is out of the organization after 1 year. He did sign that deal, which clearly didn't work 1 year, and then you buy him out. But, Tucker Poolman is a good add in the back end as well. I think their defense needed some movement. And I'd rather have Tucker Poolman at this point than Alex Edler. Edler is one of the great Canucks of all time, you could say. But Poolman's better right now than Edler. So I do like that upgrade as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like to anyone who may be looking up a 1 point over 40 games in Winnipeg last year, but that's not his job. His job is to play on the edge, to eat those meat and potatoes, like you like to say. And he's just a gritty defensive defenseman who's going to block shots and help his goalie out whenever he can. So if he's in the fourth, fifth position on that team, well, that's pretty strong. And I don't mind the cap. They gave him extra term, but he'll be 32 when the contract's done. So it's not like he's aged off completely.
Right.
I agree. It's a good contract for a good defenseman.
Yeah. And you look at their team, they got two forward lines that are, teams are going to have to game plan for. It used to really just be one line, but like you said, Pettersson come back, you got Horvat. So that's two really big horses down the middle. And then you get guys like Garland inserted. And then you got some other skill players on the outside. Hoglander, I think, is a player that can take a step. I like his game. He is small, but I do think he's got some upside there. But they do have two forward lines now. You could say, okay, this team can score and they can be effective offensively.
Yeah, and just the last point I'll have is if Thatcher Demko plays like he can, or he kind of just gets hot, and he'll win you games. Maybe you only have to get 1 or 2 goals, but he'll make 30, 40 saves when he's really well. We saw that in the bubble. And we saw it for a spurt last year. I think 1 month he was probably the best goalie of the month. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, if he can play like that more consistently, no doubt he'll be an NHL starter and probably down the future maybe a Vezina winner.
Yeah, he's got all the tools. I mean, he's gonna be expected to, I think, to play 55 to 60 games because Halak's a good backup, but he's a backup. And it's not a tandem situation to me. We see a lot of those around the league. I think it's clearly Demko and then Halak here. Before we go to the other Canadian teams, Arizona, obviously they're in the opposite direction. They lose OEL, they lose Garland. They've also lose their starting goaltender. And then they got 1 year left in Glendale. Then they got to find a new place to play. I mean, it's a disaster in Arizona. I think really their biggest thing will be, are they going to be better than Buffalo?
I know. That's like the greatest race right there. Who's going to finish last? But yeah, no, I mean, I try to take, when I was doing this, I tried to take some optimistic and pessimistic views on each team. And there's not a whole lot of optimistic views when it comes to the Coyotes. Just the scandal last year with, the prospects and having them try out there. One thing I will say, I really think you got to go to your two young players right now in Keller and Chychrun and basically say, what do you want? Do you want to stay here and go through a pretty brutal rebuild, let's be honest?
Yeah.
Or do you want a chance to play somewhere where you might have a chance to win? Even if it's not at a top dog, well, at least you're playing on a team that you're going to be winning on somewhat basis.
Yeah, if I'm them, I try desperately to keep Chychrun because you see Columbus kept Werenski. And I think that's important. You need at least somebody that gets like Werenski plays there. Maybe I can give it a shot. He's a good player. Chychrun, you can sell that. I think the kid's a stud. I think there's an outside chance if the NHL players go, which I don't need them to go, but I talked about that yesterday, but it's a negative opinion. But he could make the Olympic team on the back end. I think he'll be in the mix for the team.
He'll definitely be trying out for sure. I mean, there's no doubt he took a leap last year than he did the year before and just became this, offensive dynamo and really kind of pushed OEL out of a first man position. And that's probably why Arizona said, yeah, you can take him. Like we've got our guy and he's good here. And that's an excellent point about, comparing Columbus and Werenski, because I do think you need that guy. Keller's a little less appealing. He's had some time to show that, if he's going to be a top winger. And even though he may be able to, I don't know if he's got that superstar status that you've mentioned a couple podcasts ago in your rankings. But what I like about Arizona is they got all these guys now with, that the Dmitry Haskinen. Someone might say, well, why the hell do you like that? Well, he's on a 1 year deal, and guess what? You're going to flip him for a third or second round pick at the deadline. if he's good, if he has a year. Same with Antoine Stroman. Guys that, we lost a defenseman this year. Well, we'll pick up Stroman because he's a veteran. So you got a bunch of these one-off deals that are going to work. Same with Phil Kessel. Where do you think he's going to go if they end up dishing him somewhere?
I'm sure he doesn't want to leave because it's good golf, and I don't think he. Yeah, Phil. It's a tough one. I think it truly depends on the team that's close to winning. He's got a big ticket, so it's tougher to trade for that. But towards the trade deadline, it's less of a cap hit and less money moving in and out. So maybe like a Washington, if they're in the mix. I think a team that could really use a boost going into a playoff. Phil Kessel's got 2 Stanley Cups. Yes, he's not the hardest worker in the world, but he has won 2 Stanley Cups. He's got that under his belt. One would argue that he should have won a Conn Smythe in 2016. So, I mean, he is appealing. I mean, his work ethic isn't, but he is a playoff player, and he's going to play every game. He never misses any. He plays 82 every year. You know that 100%.
Yeah, he's a gamer, and as a former Leaf, just love him to death. Hot dog eating motherfucker, but he's gonna give you production in the playoffs if you get there, like you said, closer to the cap. Less money you have to spend. No, I'm just curious on when he's going there. Arizona's got 2 AHL goalies in that basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a dumpster fire, and right now they're just saying, are we gonna get Bedard or are we gonna get Wright in these next couple drafts showing up, because that's all they've got to be looking forward to. I feel bad for any Coyotes fan right now.
Yeah, and really, Shay, this might put a damper on you, but I want to bring it up. They need to rebuild their organization, and I mean this sincerely. By the time Austin Matthews is an unrestricted free agent. I'm not saying he's going there, but if they can show a franchise that at least has some hope, they have an outside chance of acquiring him. Do I think he'll go there? No, but it is his hometown. If they have a team that's competent, then you could at least sell the argument that maybe Austin would consider coming back to Arizona.
Yeah, spoiler alert, if anyone doesn't know this already, I'm a Leafs fan, and you're not the first person to make fun of me in that, but I sleep well at night looking at the status of the Arizona Coyotes, and where that will be when Austin Matthews finally rings the bell and done his multi-deal contract. So we'll see. I mean, it could happen. If it happens, it happens. I'm not. I'll be upset, but nothing I'm going to do. Just weep over it.
Yeah. No. So let's pivot to Calgary, where this team they drive me up the wall. They lose their captain. Really a great transition where they had Jerome McGinley for many years, one of the great leaders in the history of the sport. You go to Mark Giordano, who's just a journeyman, had to battle his way to get to the NHL. Seattle takes him. They don't protect him. But yet they remain pretty similar to what they had last year, Shay. They had Blake Coleman, but they still have the 2 guys that they plan on, getting them over the hump, which would be Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan. Yeah,
I know. And, both these guys coming to the end of their deals, it's really – I've got it written down here. If I'm the GM, I'm walking up to Matthew Tkachuk and I'm saying, what do you want to do? I'm going to do everything I can to keep you here because I know you're the future of the franchise. You can be a leader just like your father was. But, what do I got to do to keep you here? Do I have to blow it up or do I have to go all in and, do something else? But if I'm Matthew Tkachuk, I'm saying I don't want to blow it up all the way, but you got to get rid of those 2 guys. Gaudreau is at the end of his contract. You got to hope someone would be able to take him off. Monahan with injuries, it's less likely, but maybe someone picks him up for a good deal. But what are your thoughts on that? If you're in the GM's position, obviously.
Yeah, I've said this for a couple of weeks. I correlate Calgary to Philadelphia, where I look at Philly, where they had Voracek and Giroux, and I said these 2 players are never going to win as your 2 best players. And Voracek is gone, but Philly's made some interesting moves this offseason. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. I haven't loved everything they've done. I do get some of the moves they made. But I look at Calgary and say, last offseason, they signed Markstrom to a long-term extension. And I don't think they weren't a goalie away from going on a deep Stanley Cup run. They didn't make the playoffs. So now I look at it and say, Tkachuk, 1 year left before he's free. You got Monahan, who, like you said, maybe it's not all his fault because he had 8 surgeries one off season. The guy is a warrior, but his body clearly isn't what he used to be. Gaudreau, really, he had some good seasons, but he's not a playoff performer. He's like Mitch Marner, Shay, in a sense, because these two guys get to the playoffs after having 90-point plus seasons, and it kind of vanishes for them. So I look at it and say, you signed a goalie long-term, who Markstrom's a good goalie, but he's not great. I think he got paid quite well. And then you have these two guys as your face with Elias Lindholm. You're not winning anything with these guys. And, maybe you're in the Pacifics. You're like, okay, we'll win this division. But, okay, you win a crap division. You start playing the teams in the Central. It's over. Winnipeg, St. Louis, some of these teams over there, they're not messing around. And I don't like your chances of beating them, quite frankly.
No, I agree. Even if they win, they're getting swallowed up by Vegas. So I don't know. I don't know what they do. If I were the GM, I'm getting rid of Gaudreau at some point this year, just to change it up. Because like you said, it's stale. They've been trying to do the same old thing, and it's not working year after year after year. Like you said, I like the Coleman deal. That adds a little bit of depth. I think he's a good player. Not going to get them over the edge, obviously, but it does give them, that two-way forward depth that they kind of needed. Dylan Dubé signed this week, $2.3 million for 3 years. That's not a bad deal either. He can probably be a player in your middle six moving forward. But I look at the D and I'm thinking, who on here is going to pick it up offensively? Because a guy you used to like, I don't know if you still like him, Noah Hanifin, he's kind of been dry offensively. You added Zadorov.
Dry.
Zadorov's not. Zadorov's as dry as the Sahara Desert. And Rasmus Anderson, he's a good puck mover, but he's not going to be your offense. Your first, your back end to your power play. I think they really got to look and they got to sign somebody who's going to be able to generate some points for them.
And again, it's completely unfair to put Rasmus Anderson, who's probably a 2-3 defenseman, in the number one role. That's the team's fault. Like, that's not the player being put in a position where he's not going to succeed. The Leafs did this to Dion Phaneuf. I think you look at Montreal over the years, they did this plenty of times where they had D put in positions where they're going to fail. And I look at the team and fault them for doing this when it happens, because it's like, Rasmus Anderson isn't getting 60 points. Well, no kidding. If you looked at it and knew your players and you just didn't say, he's our best option, let's hope for the best. Like, that's not how you run a team. That's not how you do business. You don't just say, there's a crack in the foundation. Well, let's build the house. Well, no, you get it patched up, fix it. I'm not exactly a carpenter here, but I'm not brain dead either. And yeah, I agree. Gio's gone, Zadorov and Valimaki and Anderson and I like Hanifin, but he doesn't bring much to the table offensively. And then you're relying on players who haven't been that great offensively over the last 2-3 years. And I'm just looking at this team saying, are they going to be the new Vancouver from last year? Because Calgary didn't make the playoffs last year, but they might fall into Vancouver territory of this division, because I think LA is going to be better. We'll talk about that next week, but I think LA will be better this year. San Jose might not, because they're but Seattle, I don't think is going to be a pushover. And I look, obviously Vegas, they speak for themselves.
Yeah. Do you think, so to answer my question, do you think Calgary should blow it up, or do you think that they should?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody?
I think they should have blew it up, last offseason. And now they're stuck because they get, after they should have Markstrom for another 4 years. Who knows if Kachuk's going to want to stay? Because I love the guy. He's my favorite player in the NHL, but he had a bad year last year. Call a spade a spade. He wasn't great. And then I look at the rest of the team and I'm like, I can't expect this team to be great. And unless Markstrom's just standing on his head like a Thatcher Demko, his former running mate, I don't see how this team really does better than, third, fourth from the bottom in this division. I don't see them as a playoff team today.
No, absolutely not. Even in my opinion, the weakest division of the thing, they're still up there clearly. And I know how you feel about the GM there, so I don't know.
I don't know. He must give off like free pizza coupons or something, because I don't know how he's still employed. And he made some good moves at the beginning, but the shelf life that some of these Canadian GMs have, I don't know if they're just cheap or what, but like I look at it and say, you're not getting good production. You're not getting good players. You're not making the playoffs. You're not making extra revenue. Why are you holding on to these guys that aren't getting you wins? And Vancouver and Calgary are a master's class in keeping guys too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So finally, we'll get to Edmonton. Obviously, your boy, Zach Hyman, went across the bow. He's now in Edmonton, leaving your Toronto Maple Leafs. They also get another former Maple Leaf in your boy, Cody Ceci. They get Duncan Keith from Chicago. What'd you make of Edmonton's offseason in as a whole?
I think their top six got better, obviously, with the addition of Hyman. They've added some okay depth, not great in Fogle and Derek Ryan. Mm-hmm. But overall, I can't say I'm impressed. I think their D's worse. They haven't really. I haven't heard any rumblings about getting rid of Koskinen and shelving that contract. I know that's maybe not even possible, but you got to think maybe put a prospect with him, and he's got to be attracted to somebody at least. Maybe a Dylan Holloway or a Lavoie, and yeah. So that's kind of my general sense. But I think you give McDavid a guy like Hyman, I see a fairly good relationship evolving there, just the way they both play. But yeah, overall, I think Edmonton's still kind of in the rut that they've always been, and still spinning their tires, frankly.
Yeah, I think they're definitely a playoff team, but like we said, this division stinks. That doesn't tell you a whole lot. But I do think Hyman will have a good transition playing with McDavid, playing from a top 3 or 4 player in the league to playing with the best player of the league. He's very familiar with playing with elite talent. Then you got Puljujarvi and you got Leon and Nuge, and so you got strong first 2 lines. It's hard to beat those top 2 lines, really, if you look at it on paper. Yeah, their back end. I think Keith will help. I know people hated that contract with that trade when it first happened, but I do think he'll help the team. The Ethan Bear trade, I get it for cap, but it did not make much sense to me. I would much rather have Ethan Bear than Warren Fogle. Fogle does do things that I like, and Edmonton probably needs a little bit more jam in their bottom 6, but I like Ethan Bear. To be quite frank, Shay, I like Ethan Bear more than I like Evan Bouchard. I've never liked Evan Bouchard, and clearly they see him differently than me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, you kind of relying on Bouchard to become this top 4 defenseman when he really hasn't shown that yet. He could be maybe a bottom pairing guy, but yeah, like I was saying, I don't like Cody. I don't like Ethan Bear. I don't like Cody Ceci more than I like Ethan Bear, and they gave Cody Ceci more money. So I was like, well, how are you fixing your cap problem if you're just gonna give money away to a guy that, we've mentioned this before, really hasn't earned it. He had a good year in Pittsburgh, but he didn't do anything stellar. He just didn't get noticed, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Kind of a bum, but yeah. So I don't know what they're doing there and why they go get him. I'm just not comfortable with Ceci and Keith being my second pairing if you're going to put Barry and Nurse your top pairing. Mm-hmm. And that's what more worries me, if anything. And, that can be, we'll say, amended with good goaltending, but that really relies on the head of Mike Smith and whether he, performs like he did last year. But who knows?
Yeah. He's 40 and a 2-year deal. You couldn't have got him on a 1. I don't get why it had to be 2. They have Koskinen still there, that they let Peter Chiarelli sign him a day before he was fired. I still don't know how that got processed by Edmonton Brass, but that was crazy. But I look at their goaltending and say, yeah, Mike Smith was fantastic last year, but he still ran out of gas in the playoffs.
Mhm.
You know, they got swept by Winnipeg with a lot of expectations. And I look at this and say, I still don't like their goaltending. Koskinen is average back up to below average, and Mike Smith's 40. So if he even falters a little bit, your only option is Koskinen. That is beyond scary to me because I have no confidence in him. And then you're relying on outscoring your opponent. And McDavid and Draisaitl can go 1-2 in points. We see that throughout the regular season the past 2 years. It doesn't mean you're going to have any playoff success.
Yeah, exactly. It's and also a guy like Zach Cassian, who had a pretty piss poor year last year, I would say. He needs to kind of become that elite penalty killer. I feel like if they're going to help out, their goaltending and stuff like that, and not worry about his points, and that involves being in their their bottom six and taking less minutes, but being effective in that sense and kind of just killing penalties, doing the nitty gritty just to help out the goaltending and to me a weaker defensive core than they would have had last year. Don't believe Clefbaum is coming back
Sounds like he's out for the year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there you go. You kind of lose you got another blow there. I mean, what are your thoughts on Kailer Yamamoto? Is he going to be a top 6 guy? Do you see him more as a depth player?
Interesting player because you got Hyman, McDavid, and say Puljujärvi. We'll say that's line one just for fun here. And then there's Leon, Nuge, and who would you say plays with them?
You could put a Warren Fogle in just
just as more of a gritty guy. Yeah. So then you could go Turris, Holloway, Yamamoto on your third line. I hate that Turris is in there, but again, they don't have a whole lot of depth down there. Their bottom 6 is still a very weak part of their team. I don't think they've really improved it.
It's like a guy who goes to the gym, just does chest and back, and just leaves his legs there. He's like an air mic, all upper body, no lower body. Sorry, buddy, I'm not sure for that, but anyways, it's true. But you've got a great top 6, but that's got to trickle down eventually, and you're counting on guys like Dylan Holloway, Lavoie, to maybe come in and be effective players. But if they're supposed to be skilled players, then you have to transition them into roles that they may not want to play. Kind of like, for an example, an Ivan Barbashev when took the 2019 St. Louis Blues. He came in as an offensive guy, turned into a checker, helped them win a cup. You kind of have to do that same transition with these guys if they want to be effective right away, because they're not stepping into a top 6 role when they come on this team.
No, absolutely not. And it takes a player to accept that role. And that's one of the bigger things about it too, is Nick Kiprios talked about this in his book, how he was getting 40 goals in junior, close to 100 points. Everybody does that. You come in the league, and the people that stick, if you're not going to be a superstar, you're going to have to fight. Back in the day, you had to fight. Now you have to kill penalties. You have to block shots. You have to grind. And if you still want to be a skilled guy, you'll be playing in the coast in a matter of years, and your career will be Alex Galchenyuk's before you know it. But it's interesting because I think some of these teams are going to look better than they are because of the division that they play in. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get to April, May next year and Edmonton's getting a lot of hype as a team that could do some real damage in the playoffs, where with the roster they have now, I just don't buy it.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the Kings look good with the emergence of Zegras and Jamie Drysdale. We'll talk about them next week. I think Anaheim could make a splash, perhaps. They got decent goaltending, unlike the team we're talking about right now. So it really all depends. But like you said, this is a weak conference, so a team like Vancouver, I can see doing some damage as long as they can just stay consistent and not go on any droughts. Obviously, they heavily rely on Demko, like we talked about earlier, to win them some games. But for the most part, it's anybody's. Obviously Vegas will be at the top of that heap, you would think, but who knows? Yeah,
they got a lot of switch ups too. Maybe Jack Eichel goes to a team in this division some point next year. That could be an X factor. So good discussion today. I love the positive and negative. You're more the positive guy. I'll bring the negatives. Good to balance each other out. So Good little talk. But yeah, next week we'll talk about the Cali teams, some teams in Nevada, Seattle coming in. So we'll touch on the other half of the Pacific Division while talking about episode 1 of season 4 of Breaking Bad. Got anything on the go the rest of the week as we head into the Labor Day long weekend?
Yes, yeah, I'm actually a nice little golf tournament on Friday and Saturday down home, so I'll be able to see you again. Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll give a solid update on Tuesday of how I do. How many errors I perform. I don't expect any, but you never know. Sometimes you get caught off guard. We'll say. So no, that's good. That's a memorial tournament for Dalton Thompson. So someone we lost two recently. And other than that, just maybe see some family and just maybe relax. Just basically finish off the week, and what feels like the end of the summer coming up. What about yourself? Good. I'd say good interview with you and Darcy Young.
Daryl.
Sorry, Daryl Young. I knew that. I listened to that yesterday. Thought that was really good, and can see your skills are starting to home, and you're starting to get a lot better.
Oh, well, thank you. No, he's a great guy and good interview as well. Got a lot of different details that I didn't know about scouting, but he's got a lot of cool stories, and wearing the cup ring on the pod was pretty cool as well. So that was cool to see. This weekend, college football Saturday. That'll probably take up 95% of my day. 1:00. So probably pretty late at night. So that'll take up most of that day. Sunday, I might do something that I've done once before. I did the 100,000 step challenge probably a month and change ago, and I might do it again on Sunday. We'll see how ambitious I am.
Is it another addiction, kind of like football, for doing these challenges?
A little bit, yeah. I just want to see how my body feels after doing another one. Not guaranteed I'm going to do it yet, but it is a long weekend. I'll have Monday to recover. So that's kind of my thinking. I might do it on Sunday, but
I'll be around if you need some G2 or some poached eggs. I'll be around to help you out. So just let me know. I'm a call away.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. And but no, I'm sure I'll see you this weekend. And but great pod today, and have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, mate. You too.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week, and I'll be back later in the week to talk many things, including with Matt Wright on Friday as we preview the NFL and college football seasons. So until then, take care, and we'll talk soon.